Hi everyone, thank you for joining the webinar today. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes to give people a chance to join the webinar, and then we will get underway. Hi everyone, thank you for joining the webinar today. We're just going to give it 1 or 2 more minutes to give people a chance to join the webinar, and then we will get underway. Thank you again for joining. Great. I think we can get underway now. So once again, thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. The webinar today is on communicating and promoting your Christmas Challenge campaign. We're really grateful for Lindsay Harrod from the FSI joining us today and delivering the webinar for us. It's really great to have them. They always deliver great webinars for us. Just go to the next slide. I'll just go over the session today. Yeah, so it will be 45 minutes, roughly 45-minute presentation, and then there'll be a 15-minute Q&A session at the end. If you would like to ask any questions for Lindsay or for us, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you'd like to introduce yourself to any of the other attendees or leave any other types of messages, please use the chat function on the right-hand side of your Zoom panel. Please make sure the to field is set to everyone so everyone can see what you are writing. A reminder that this webinar is being recorded. We will post it on our YouTube channel, and we'll post a link in the webinar article in the resources section of your Christmas Challenge campaign dashboard, and we'll also put up a PDF of the slides today. We'll be working through the marketing guidebook, which is again available in the resources section of your campaign dashboard. So you may want to download a copy if you're able to, but don't worry if you don't have access to it right now. And yeah, as mentioned here, there will be more webinars in the coming weeks that we've already communicated to you, so please do sign up for them. And if you want to leave any messages on your social media channels about today's webinar, please use the hashtag Christmas Challenge 21, just so we can see it and we can also retweet it and share it on our channels. Without further ado, I will hand over to Lindsay now to deliver the webinar. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Sahil. Morning, everyone. Afternoon now, isn't it? It's midday. Nice to have you all joining us. Thanks for taking the time. I recognize lots of names from Monday's webinar, so hopefully you recognize me from there if you were on the kind of bigger picture planning your campaign. We're going to dive today into a bit more around your promoting your campaign, what different channels you might use. So let's start by thinking about what channels might you use. There are so many different options out there, and we've got to be reflecting on, we've all got limited capacity, limited time and resource. So thinking about the most effective ones. So in the first webinar, we talked about segmenting your audiences. So we talked about who might your audiences for the campaign be, who might your supporters be. And some of your ideas that came through were, perhaps past donors, people who've signed up to your newsletter but not donated, event attendees, your corporate partners, etc. So go back to that list and build your campaign plan, your channel selection around those. Think about where they already are. So where are they already accessing information about you, and build it into that. So if you know they're on your website, then make sure your website is the best channel targeted at that audience. If you already have a magazine or a newsletter that goes to them, to that target audience, utilize that. If you've got events coming up in the diary, utilize those. Throughout all of these channels, though, you've got your Christmas campaign page as that kind of hub, the endpoint that all of those should be driving towards. So think about what that customer journey is going to be like, from seeing a tweet, from seeing a flyer. What's that journey going to be like? It's not just a standalone channel, it's part of a much bigger journey. You might find that you've got broad segments, you might want to narrow it down. So we talked about, you might have, donors as a general segment, or you might narrow it down to people who've given at different giving levels, people who give only to the Christmas challenge normally. So think about who those segments might be, where they already are, what you already know about them, what channels they might connect with most. And if you're reaching out to new audiences, reflect on those audiences, what do you know about them and how can you build on that? So if you know that your Instagram following is usually people of a certain age or demographic, then that might be where you find more people investing in that area. We do this webinar or similar webinar every year, but of course, the last couple of years have been particularly different for fundraising. And so a few considerations for 2021. We've got to plan for flexibility. We don't know, hopefully nothing too drastic is going to change in the next couple of months before your challenge, but we still want to plan for flexibility, and remembering that people are in different places, physically, psychologically, with everything that's going on. So if you've got face-to-face events, is there a hybrid option that you could offer? Is there a digital version of things that you could offer? What are your backup plans? And this is why having multiple channels and having that real clear view of your audiences and where they are and might be is really important. And going to where people already are. So as I said, if you've already got them in your venue coming to events or coming to access services, then that's a great place to look. If they're already in a WhatsApp group that you communicate information about your work to, build on that, think about where they will be, but plan for that flexibility. Lots of us have made some quite big digital advances in the last couple of years. Lots of the charities that I've been working with had never done online giving before, had never run a kind of emergency appeal before, had never set up monthly donors. This is a great opportunity. We're out of the kind of firefighting immediate change mode that we talked about in last year's Christmas challenge webinar. We are in a position now to start thinking long term. So how can you translate all those advances, all the people you got from paper forms onto your email newsletter, or the growth you got on social media, perhaps? How can you translate that into something long term? So we talked last time as well about setting some objectives, and this is where those come up. So we're not just in that emergency, we need cash now phase. A lot of us might need cash right now, but we also are in a position, and our donors are as well, to start thinking longer term. So how can you re-engage people who've supported you before over the last year, or maybe became aware of your services in a way that they weren't before? And how can you perhaps turn them into monthly supporters or get them involved in the wider picture? People who signed up a petition or signed up to volunteer, how can you involve them in the organization in a sustainable long-term way? And one of the questions that has been coming up and down for the last couple of years is that virtual event fatigue. And I don't think there's a scientific answer to what people are feeling about virtual events. We've definitely seen a drop in the number of them. But you're still seeing successes with it. We're still seeing our online training booking up. People's mindsets have shifted around virtual events, but you might need to be thinking of something a little bit different. What can you offer that makes it feel different and stand out? Your Zoom quizzes, some of you, I'd love to hear in the chat if you've had successes and what events you're finding still work. But what can you offer that's a bit different? Perhaps it's something really themed. Perhaps there's something tangible in the post that goes alongside it. And perhaps it's also not thinking of an virtual event as a standalone thing. What's the wraparound offer? Is it part of a bigger campaign? Is there a follow-up session? Is there a follow-up phone call to secure the kind of momentum that was built in that? Morning, everyone. Afternoon for everyone. saying hello in the chat box. Nice to see who you all are as well. Lots of new people, new to the Big Give as well. So welcome. Congratulations. As I said, yeah, would love to hear some ideas in the chat as we go through on all of these channels, what you're finding is working, what questions you have. Remember to put your questions in the chat, the Q&A box, and suggestions in the chat. So let's dive into some of those channels then. So number one, website. That's going to be one of your biggest channels. We know a lot of our Christmas challenge winners, everyone reflects that your website is a really important place for your challenge. So make sure the campaign is in a prominent place on your website and make sure that it's reflective of your campaign messaging. So we talked last time as well about, your timetabling and planning in advance. So think about what else is going to be going on the website and your blog at that point. I've seen some really nice banners on home pages promoting the Big Give. So when people stumble across your page or look at your page for something else, they come across that and you'll be surprised by the number of organic kind of donations you get that way. If you've got a support us page, and if you don't, that's one thing I would recommend looking into. So a way, a donate page, but support us, you might have all sorts of different things in there. You might have gifts and wills, corporate partnerships, etc. But you might want to think about making your donate element for the span of the challenge. Take it off your normal Just Giving or Virgin Money Giving or whatever page and direct people to to the Big Give Christmas Challenge during the week instead. So think about all the different places on your website people are driven to. Likewise, news updates, blogs, sharing stories throughout the week, updating your followers on the successes, your progress in the campaign as you go. Think about keeping your content dynamic. So again, planning in advance is key here. But what content can you build up in advance and during the campaign? So that might be progress updates, that might be new stories, it might be new impact stories, explain to people what difference this campaign is going to make. If you have just capacity for one post, make sure it's a really good one. But if you've got space to plan in a few things, perhaps from some different perspectives, could you get one of your volunteers to write a blog or a donor, one of your pledges to write a post? And they don't have to be these huge, long, complex things. With your website, though, making sure you're sending people to your campaign page on the Christmas Challenge website. So the fewer clicks, the better. Make it as simple as possible. And I'd recommend testing this. Get some external people to test out once you've got your draft page ready to go. Get them to test the journey from receiving an email to making a donation and then through. What is that journey like for them? You might be surprised by the hiccups that you find. One of the Christmas Challenge winners last year was the Bendrig Trust, and they reflected on the website being, a really important tool for them. They reflected they really made it work for them. So they kind of funneled everyone towards the Christmas Challenge page. So they had a blog article, they had Google Ads set up, so you can get free Google Ads, Google Ad grants. So they really thought about, the SEO of that as well. They had that blog on the homepage and they redirected their donate button to the Big Give during the week. And they found that worked really well for them. The next channel to reflect on is email. We talked last time that this is going to be a really important one. And one of the questions we got in the chat box actually was around how many to send. And we talked about, there's no scientific exact answer to this, but we've heard a lot of charities have had really good success with kind of a 3 or 4 stage. So a pre-launch or a save the date in advance, maybe a couple of weeks before, letting people know this is coming up, save the date, get ready, build some excitement. Then a launch on the first day, we're good to go. Let's get your donations in, launching your stories and your ask then. A progress update, maybe 2/3 through the week, how much you've raised, what's left to go, and final progress and thank you perhaps on the last day. We talked as well about thinking about, can you personalize that or split it out? Depends what systems you have, but if you can take out people who've already donated from the later emails and make sure they only get thank yous, not more asks, that's going to be really good for your stewardship and building relationships with people. Again, as soon as you've opened this up, launched your campaign, driving people to your campaign page. Personalize your emails as well in terms of using as many specific information as you can. If you could got the ability to put their name in it, in the email, in the subject line, we know that drives open rates much higher if you've got something personalized in the open rate in the subject line. But also, again, going back to those segments, do you want a slightly different framing for someone who normally gives you £20 at Christmas each year to someone who gives you £20 a month all year round? Or is it about what different campaigns or causes or stories you think might resonate with different audiences most? Make sure you have that clear call to action. Again, that it's really easy. That journey is really easy. Once you've inspired them with your stories, you've got them excited about the campaign, make it as easy as possible to donate. So drive them straight through to that page. I can't think of many situations where you need them to go through your website from an email. Most of the time, you're going to want them to go straight to the campaign page, to the donation. The fewer opportunities to click off, get distracted by something else, the better. And one top tip from personal experience is to start sorting out your email list now. So if you are going to segment, or if you're not sure, checking up all your permissions, your consent to email people about fundraising messages, make sure you're thinking about that. Thinking about, have you got all the information? How are you going to tag and segment people? That takes time. Start thinking about it now. Here's a really nice email example from Global Witness, who were another Christmas Challenge winner last year. We talked a little bit, I think we looked at maybe some of their messaging in the proposition section last time. But what I really like about this is, it's their email: "Dear supporter, with our climate in crisis, business as usual isn't an option. Join the climate revolution and demand global change that puts people and planet before profit and power." Got a really clear message. They've invited you in, first of all. It's really simple to read, short paragraphs, short sentences. They drive you to the donation page pretty quickly, and then you can scroll down for more information or to see the video. But make sure that opening is punchy. They know what they're opening. You're driving them through. So if they're convinced straight away, excellent. If they need more information, more persuasion through the video, they've got that as well. Couple of questions about MailChimp, which we will come back to later. Actually, let's talk about it now. So I'm not going to recommend any specific platforms, but I invite anyone in the chat, if you've got a platform that you think works well. There are definitely some issues with some platforms sending things to spam. Some of the things that work, making sure your email lists are up to date and you've got all the right consents, etc. We know MailChimp's pretty harsh on making sure that you've got that opt-in from everyone. You could also, to be honest, we used to mix it up a little bit at my last charity when we did the big give. We would do some through, we didn't use MailChimp, but something similar, .mailer it was. But we also did some just through our personal emails. So probably not to your whole mailing list, but it might be a subsect of that. It might be, perhaps people who donated last year, you could add a kind of update a couple of weeks before as well, make a personalized email there using, what do you call it? Mail merge. You've got to make sure you've still got your GDPR compliant things in there, your unsubscribe link, etc. But Outlook is much less likely to go, or Gmail or whatever you normally use, much less likely to go to spam. So mixing it up might be something to think about. But yeah, invite anyone else in the chat if you've got any tips for avoiding spam or other platforms. Let Melissa and I can't remember who else it was, Carl. No. The next channel I wanted to talk about was videos, because we keep hearing some amazing examples from Christmas Challenge winners about using videos as a really, really powerful way to tell your story. And I think historically we've seen, big shiny videos or TV adverts, big budgets, but actually some of the most powerful ones are done on really low or no budget. Mobile phone cameras are very decent now. You can get free editing software. And I know it's difficult right now to get footage. So think a bit creatively about how you can tell that story? Have you got previous material, previous footage that you could cut in? Have you got some photos? Could you do something like animation? There's an amazing charity video that I saw, and they couldn't show their beneficiaries because of kind of privacy reasons. But what they had a voiceover of one of their beneficiaries talking about why this charity helps them feel more at home. And they just had a video of someone drawing a house, like a little cartoon house. Really simple, really engaging, about 45 seconds to a minute with that voiceover. And it really, really worked. So think creatively, even if you can't get, really high quality, active, current footage. Videos is also a great way to get some different voices into it, different perspectives, and bring it to life. So if you can hear from your service users, your partners, that's going to be amazing. But also hearing from your project managers or your volunteers, the people on the front line, you can hear some amazing stories like that. Let your passion shine through, let your authenticity shine through. Doesn't have to be super scripted or formal. Could be a conversation, a little short story from someone about why they love the organization. The Saltways is a cool company that do lots of films for small charities, and one of their top tips from a blog that they ran was, if you can't think how to structure your video, you can't get that spark of inspiration to start you off, call up a couple of your supporters and ask them why they support you. Is there any particular stories that resonated with them? What stands out to them? Why do they care about it? Why are they motivated? And you can build your message around that. If you're feeling, stuck in the day-to-day and you need that external perspective, no one's going to know better how to resonate with supporters than your supporters themselves. So give a couple of them a ring. Wanted to share with you a couple of examples to inspire us today. So I'm going to share my sound and share a couple of videos. I hope these work for you. Let me know in the chat if they're not for any reason. So this is from Street League, who were also a Christmas challenge nominee or winner last year. Lovely video using lots of different perspectives. I'll share this with you now.
I didn't really do well in school, didn't get along with the teachers, got expelled in Y11, joined Street League because a couple of my mates went there and my dad's the manager, so I knew about it before I even went. I had the option college or go to there, and they all said to me, you'll be dumb if you don't go. So I thought, yeah, I'll go try it out and see how it is. And it turned out a lot better for me. When I went there, I realised it wasn't like school. It was more informal. Halfway through the lesson, I didn't really do well in school, didn't get along with the teachers, and it turned out a lot better for me.
My bad.
When I went there, I realised it wasn't like school. It was more informal. Halfway through the lesson, you'd be having a laugh and a joke, and you'd be getting your work done at the same time. Because of how I was taught at Street League, I was more confident going into the exams than I was when I was in school. Because they taught me a lot more in half the time than I did in the full last year of my school days.
If it wasn't for Street League, I probably wouldn't have my qualifications right now. I'd probably still be in college trying to resit them, and I wouldn't be as focused as I was when I went to Street League, because Street League taught me a lot and helped me grow as an individual.
So I love that example it feels really genuine. It feels really, it's a different perspective. And it also it's so different to a lot of the language that we use. And, your funding application should a big give when you're talking about, gain qualifications and improve employability. Hearing it from someone, hearing why that actually mattered and why Street League in particular was so special, why that approach worked, is really persuasive. This is another video example from the Liberty Choir. This is their campaign launch video. They used a mixture of past footage. They also have some stuff they created now with kind of quotes on and slides and images. So they did all of this, I believe, without any new filming last year. So hopefully that might inspire you if you're in that position.
My name is Jenny Agata, and I'm supporting Liberty Choir in the Big Give Christmas Challenge. Visit thebiggive.org.uk between the 1st and the 8th of December, and your donation will be doubled. The Big Give Christmas Challenge. One donation, twice the impact.
It's really undescribable to describe something that's so creative and fantastic and gives me joy.
Yo, yo, yo! It's time for Liberty Choir Radio.
One love, one heart. Let's get together and feel alright.
There's a South London choir run by a woman called MJ Paranzino with Ginny Dougherty. Part of that choir goes into Wandsworth Prison with the blessing of the governor of the prison. And that gives them a place to go to, a place to help them back into society a bit, where people welcome them.
You have the music, you have the singing, you have the combination of people being together, and you suddenly have, amidst your time in there, there's the possibility to actually feel connected again.
That's the amazing thing about the Liberty Choir, is the support from in prison to outside, and supporting people to lead crime-free lives with genuine connections to the outside world.
Hello, this is Robert Bathurst, and I support the Liberty Choir.
I support Liberty Choir.
Reoffending happens because there aren't many opportunities to just get back into society in an ordinary way. It was just an extraordinary experience, and I felt one that made a huge difference to these people's lives.
So I'll stop it there. You can see it goes on to tell you a bit more about the organisation and drive you to the donation page as well. Obviously helps if you've got something, eye-catching or ear-catching like a choir, and you've got some celebrity ambassadors, always adds a little something. But what I really like is that they've used stuff they've already had. So appearances in local press or in the news, previous footage, some quotes on those slides. And, for most of our organizations, that's going to bring it to life far more than any of that written down on a website or in a page. That's going to feel much more connecting. The next channel to touch on is social.
I support Liberty Choir.
It's so important.
Social media. My internet's can be being a bit funny today, but we're here. So social media, you've got another webinar which goes into this in a bit more detail from a proper social media expert in a couple of weeks, so check that out. But when you're thinking about your channel planning, again, I go back to that top tip. Think about where your target audiences already are and target your time there. It's much better to do a couple of platforms really well than to try and get across all of them really poorly. Again, you might want to start thinking about this now. So building this up, if you've got, perhaps you haven't invested as much in it recently, or you think one of your target audiences will definitely be on one of those platforms, start building up your profile now, start building that connection. Equally, if a lot of your content now is just kind of either reactive or just pushing services or kind of informational things, you can start switching the narrative now, telling more of those impact stories. A lot of the winners last year reported that their posts of impact stories, so people's stories of the difference that you'd made, those were the most liked and engaged with and retweeted of all of their posts. So tell these stories, start switching the narrative over. Social media is also great because it's about networks and you can spread the word out wider. So Do you have anyone who follows you who might have a big following? There are some tools you can find online that will actually do that for you. They'll organize all your followers by their follower numbers, and you could make some direct approaches to them, ask them to retweet it. Also, make it as easy as possible for people to share it. So ask your trustees, give your trustees an infographic to share. Ask your volunteers to share it on social media. Give them something really appealing. We know that images and videos work the best on social media compared to text. So use those, create those for your followers and your supporters to share. As I said, much more specialized tips in the next webinar with, is it with Lightful? Yeah, Teresa knows her stuff. Alongside all these digital channels, I didn't want to forget the value of personal approaches and the kind of word of mouth and the one-to-one approaches. So with all of those, you're going to be, email, website, social media, it's talking to a lot of people. But personal approaches are still going to be a super powerful and much needed channel in your plan. It does, however, of course, take that bit much more time and energy. So you want to prioritize. Usually you'd prioritize those who you think are going to give at a significant level, or it might be those who have particularly strong networks that you want them to spread the word. So think about who's best placed to make that approach. I think on Monday we talked about network mapping to find all your networks. That can help you identify the best person, who will know that. You also want to think about other factors. So, someone quite senior might appreciate an approach from the chair, whereas someone who's really invested in the project or is a volunteer might love to hear from another volunteer or from the project manager who can tell the story to life, bring the stories to life from their own experience. Some people might want to know from the fundraising manager or the fundraiser, what's this going to be like, what's the practicalities? So think about who should be involved. And you can have a couple of people in those conversations as well. You can bring a few along. When you're doing this, try and get in their shoes a little bit. Think about what their motivations might be. So tapping into anything you know about them from what they've previously supported, previous conversations you've had, what you know inspires them, why they might have connected with your cause in the first place, and personalize your ask to tap into that. So if you know that, perhaps you're a general community center, but you know that this person is very passionate about their family, they talk a lot about, investing in their children's development, perhaps your children, young people's work is the area that you focus on in the conversation. Or perhaps it's tapping into their values. They've talked a lot about justice and equity over the last year, and you can reflect on that in your conversations. I want to highlight that these are conversations. These aren't pitches. These aren't you rocking up with a slideshow or a deck of information to hand over and persuade them to give. You should be starting having these conversations now so that they feel organic. You might need to have a couple of conversations in the lead up to understand a bit more about them, and then to shape your ask, and then to confirm the donation in the week. And you should be listening as much as, if not more, in fact, definitely more than you're talking. So that's definitely a top tip if you're nervous about any of this. And I definitely remember being very nervous making my first kind of coffee meetings with donors. Just remember that this is a very normal human being most of the time. Very few of us have, your Mark Zuckerbergs and Bill Gateses in your networks as your donors. It's more likely to be people who just share a passion with you. You share a value set, you believe in the same cause, and everyone loves to talk about what they're passionate about. So ask them why they support the organization, how they came to know about you, what's really struck them about you, or what is important to them, and tailor your ask around that. Do remind them that donations can be doubled. We heard in the first webinar about the example of one donor who normally gives around £500 a year, giving 15,000 when they realized donations were doubled. So we know that's a big motivator for those high-level donors. And do start mentioning it in conversations already. So even if it's not your longer burn relationships, Street League, who we saw the video from a minute ago, they said they've actually received quite a lot of donations just from mentioning it in conversations with suppliers, with kind of partners, with other organizations, with other people that they were just chatting to, and just mentioning it in the emails and conversations they were already having. So when people are saying, you know, what are you guys up to? Is it busy? You're like, yeah, we're building up to the big give. It's this, and this is how people can get involved. And they actually got a lot of donations that way. So don't forget the power of coffee meeting or a phone call as well. It's not all about the digital tools. To wrap up with a few other ideas that we're not going to go to in great detail, but events are still a definite area to look at. It's definitely a way to build a bit more momentum than an email. You'll get a much smaller attendance than readership of an email, but you will get much greater engagement, and it's a brilliant opportunity to bring it to life, whether it's face-to-face or online, whether it's something you've already got in the diary. Perhaps you've got a carol concert, or you've got an open day, or if it's online, perhaps, you know, there's a behind the scenes tour on Zoom, perhaps there's a talk. Have you got an ambassador or someone in your organization who could give a really interesting half-hour talk on Zoom? You know, there could be really great ways to spark interest from people and to get them in the room. And as I said earlier, think about what their journey is like for them. Are you making the ask in the event if it's during the week? Or is this to get them onto your newsletter so you can make the ask in the week? Or are you following up with a phone call to ask how they found the event, and would they like to help us do more things like that in future and make more difference in future? Direct mail, so that's kind of print or things that you're sending to people. And it's still an area that definitely has a lot of potential. Again, really, there's so much in digital, but there's also still value in those traditional methods. It's a really good way, particularly if you've still got lots of audience who engage offline rather than online. But even if they're online, you know, it's something a bit different. I don't know about you, but I am 10 times more likely to open a letter from a charity that I get in the post than an email from a charity. It of course comes with a bit more cost of printing and posting, but we do see open rates much higher, and return on investment is pretty decent with direct mail. You could also wrap it into other things. Perhaps you do Christmas cards at this time of year to donors. You could mention it in there. Of course, you want to make sure that you're still having your thank yous as thank yous. Don't add an ask into there. And think through the logistics, again, what that journey is going to be like for them. So how are they going to get to your project page? Make it a really simple, memorable link, or perhaps a QR code if you think your audience are on board with QR codes. So how is that journey going to be from the paper to the Christmas challenge page? Ambassadors and patrons, so that kind of threads through all of these things, but do you have people who could be your networks, who could tap into their networks for you? Doesn't need to be, you know, big celebrities like Stephen Fry or the woman from Call the Midwife. It could just be someone with influence in your field. Perhaps it's someone with a lot of Twitter followers because they talk with expertise in your area, or perhaps they you know, have a high local profile. You know, they're the one of the VIPs in your village, your town. Who's in your network who could spread the word for you? Have that conversation now. You know, kind of soften them up at this point, bring them in, get them involved, perhaps get them involved in the planning if they have the time, so they feel that buy-in. And again, make it as easy as possible for them to do it, whether that's coming along to an event and speaking for 5 minutes, or sharing something, a post that you've sent them to share. And PR, so appearing on local radio, newspaper, all that sort of stuff, going to be covered in much more detail in Teresa's in the other webinar on the 27th. So that's a good area to look at if you are feeling like we should do a press release about this, but I'm not sure to who or about what. Head along to that webinar on the 27th. One of the examples that I loved from last year's Christmas challenge winners was Chicken Shed Theatre. They did a virtual advent quiz. So every day during the campaign, the 1st to 8th of December, they had different content on their website in this kind of interactive page, and they sent it out by email as well. So there were things like quizzes, new videos, you know, events, all sorts of things, all the time pushing people towards that donation button. Really nice. It definitely created a bit of a buzz for them around the campaign. So to bring this all together for your promotion plan, go back to those 3 elements we talked about earlier. People in the first webinar, people, proposition, and promotion. So who are you talking to? What's your message? And what's the best channel? So I like to just bring this together into a table. Timing wise, you might want to think about 3 different phases. So you've got pre-launch, launch and campaign, so during the week, and post-campaign. Don't forget that post-campaign bit where we're giving the thank yous, we're keeping people engaged, making them feel their donation really made a difference, and keeping them involved in the organization. So definitely worth thinking about those as phases. So much more guidance in the guidebook that we mentioned earlier. Kind of, we've got a bit of a tick box thing to go through to make sure you're covering all your bases of planning. And if you're involving quite a few different people, perhaps, you know, there's a volunteer committee of you running this, or, you know, a group of you within the organization, or you're sharing stuff with trustees and other colleagues, think about your project management tools. So whether there's a shared calendar, so everyone knows what's going on, if it's a spreadsheet that's got, you know, day by day or week by week in the lead up, and the day by day in the week, you know, what's going to happen when, who's going to do it, and what do we need in advance. You can notice those knock-on things then. Okay, so if we're sending the launch email on 30th of November, we need our video ready by the 25th of November, so that, and that means it needs to go to the editor on the 21st of November. So work backwards, think about the knock-on effects of everything. You could use something like Asana or Trello. So those are those online tools. I really like Asana. I think it's great because you can assign tasks to different people. You can see when they've been done. So if you want to have that oversight and make sure everything's on track. But one word of warning, everyone's got to actually use it for it to be effective. So don't recreate the wheel. If you've already got something that works for your organization, or you've got someone with the patience to send the reminders instead of automating them through a system like Asana or Trello, go with what you think is going to actually work in your organization. This is an example that my colleague actually did with the charity that she is trustee of. And again, this is using Jamboard that we mentioned last time, which is a Google tool that's free, which is basically like a flip chart with post-it notes on. So they planned out all of their different audiences, thought through what their ask is for each of them, what their motivations might be, and what the channels would be. And they had everyone working on this together, and this became their kind of campaign overview, and they translated that then into a calendar and action plan. So to wrap up before Q&A, a couple of top tips. Stick with your tried and tested. Think about what channels are already effective for you. Where are your donors already? What do you know about how they like to be communicated with? But at the same time, Christmas Challenge is a great opportunity to try something new and to see what worked, especially if you enter the awards. You know, you'll be asked to reflect on what you learnt. And if you've set some objectives that are beyond just raise money on the day, you know, get a bit creative, test out some new ideas, some new channels, some new materials, you know, using video, using images. You know, this is an opportunity to get everyone in your organization behind it and see what works. And you can then use that learning for the rest of the year for your individual giving campaigns. And one thought, do the maths. So think about, you know, what do you anticipate people will actually, what proportion of people will open the email you send? What proportion of them will actually donate? And what's your average donation? Does that add up to your target? There's lots of guides you can do online if you search kind of gift tables that will help you think through, you know, how many gifts you need at different levels to add that up to your target, and therefore how many people do you need to be speaking to at each of those levels. Do contact Hello at the Big Give if you've got questions, and there's many other webinars coming up. So we've got Ask the Panel next week, social media and PR. So if you want to go into any of those areas in more detail. We finished bang on time, pretty much minutes to spare for 15 minutes of questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Lindsay. That was really great. Yeah, we do have a couple of questions, and people please do raise any further questions that you have. So we addressed the MailChimp question previously. So I think it was Carl that asked that when will the direct link to our donate URL be available? And do you suggest people are sent to the TBG page and expect them to go to the donate page? So the campaign page itself is already accessible to you. So if you go to your campaign dashboard and click on view campaign page, that is the URL that you need to share with donors. The actual donate button will appear on that page when the campaign goes live on 30th of November at midday. So the actual donation form won't be accessible until the campaign is live. Once the campaign is live, if you want to make it a bit easier, you can share the actual direct link to the donation form. So once you click on donate, you'll go to the donation form. But before the campaign starts, we recommend sharing the campaign page with prospective donors. And someone's asked, sorry, there were a couple of questions about the webinar recording. Yes, it will be available on YouTube and we'll put the link for the recording in the webinars article, which is available in your campaign dashboard, and we'll also share the slides with you. This is an interesting question. So someone said that they work with people who are visually impaired and don't always have access to emails or social media due to this. Do you have any recommendations of getting people aware of the campaign otherwise? Any tips there, Lindsay?
Very good question. And in fact, I just wrote it on my hand to add that to my top tips of thinking about accessibility. And so thinking about, if you are using social media and video, etc., adding your alt text to images, adding your captions to videos, etc., making sure you're accounting for those access questions. So that's very, very timely. Again, I would go back to that top tip of, what do you know already works? Where are they already engaging with you? And utilize your expertise and knowledge. You might think about perhaps some events might be popular, something that's a bit more interactive, but also, get creative, whether you think an audio version doesn't have to be a video, could be a podcast style, if that's going to work for you. But go back to you'll know your audience best, what already works, and build on that. I'd also love to hear any examples in the chat from people if you've had experience of any of the channels that we haven't talked about today, or ways you might adapt for different audiences. But also don't forget that the kind of one-to-one approaches as well, or old school events.
Thanks. Emma's just asked, is there a way we can edit the campaign URL? We don't have a way to edit the URL, but we do recommend using link shortening services like Bitly, where you can create shortened, easy to remember links. So do have search of link shortening services and find the best one for you. Is there a best time to send save the date? Is there an optimum that you found from your previous experience or from other campaigns?
Again, I certainly didn't test enough to say what worked best, but we did it a week before, but that was because we kind of looked at our overall comms plan, so what else is going out. So again, I'd go back to, what is your overall communications plan for this and for your organization? If you have, a quarterly newsletter that people gets good engagement that goes out a month before, put it in there. That if that's the best way to do it, that's going to get the biggest open rate. Pop it in there. But if you send out weekly emails, it would be totally normal to send it out a week before. I would say don't go too far in advance if you can help it, because you don't want people to A, forget, or B, donate before the campaign and miss the match funding element. So yeah, I typically think a week or so before, but think about what else is going on in your messaging to them at that point.
The question from John that's just come in is that they also have a Just Giving page running from now until 24th of December, and they have a poster for it, and they wanted to know if it's practical to include the Big Give campaign on the same flyer or have separate flyer and circulate it during that week only.
That's a question. I would typically advise trying not to have two campaigns running at the same time, because I think you might confuse people, but presumably there's a strong reason for why you've got this one running in December as well. Difficult to know without knowing more about your audience for the poster and the audience for the campaign.
Would you say that's probably maybe more advisable to have to avoid donors accidentally going to the Just Giving page and making information? Would it be advisable to keep it separate just so those comms are clear in that sense?
Yeah, so I'm making some assumptions from the name of that you might be, you know, a church or something that's got a kind of regular program where you might be able to give out different flyers at different points. So if that is the case, I would do a specific big give one in the week leading up and the week of, and then keep your other one separate in the other weeks. If you have the ability, if you only have the ability for people to see one poster, difficult. Yeah, test out how it looks and maybe test with an external audience. You know, does this make sense? That's always my go-to answer. There's all these assumptions you can make, but, you know, test it with a supporter or with someone in that target audience and see what they think.
Absolutely. Do you have any advice on how to get service users involved? So a charity that work with vulnerable young people, they want to be sensitive to the ask for the asking, getting service users involved. They have some videos, photos, and quotes, but is there any other way they can ask to get them involved?
I really like that question. Yeah, I think in general, like getting your service users involved in your internal operations and your fundraising, they, you know, but make sure we're doing that respectfully, not kind of just extracting their stories for public consumption. So I'd first of all make sure that you're thinking about it well in advance and you're setting some kind of clear expectations. If it's appropriate, you might be compensating them for their time in one way or another, some kind of reward. And depending on their age and what their kind of experience is, they might be just great for like having like a working group or a focus group, getting those stories in that way, or testing your materials with them as well. And we talked about it in the proposition section of Monday's webinar. You know, always thinking with your language, you know, thinking about being empowering and not kind of patronizing, making sure that every single thing you put into a funding bid, into, you know, into your website, into an email, you would be happy for your beneficiaries to be presented like that, or you would be happy for yourself to be presented like that. So that's a good thing to test it with. I've seen some amazing examples of, you know, we looked on Monday as well about the MS charity who had some kind of young ambassadors. So people with MS who, or the ME, gosh, I can't remember, who told their stories, and it sounds like they treated them really well and respectfully, to the point where someone who was, I think maybe 10 years old, had done it the year before and was like, in November, like, please can I be part of it again this year? They were like really enjoyed telling their story and being part of it. It will take work. You don't want to be doing this a week before, being like, we need some quotes or case studies. You know, build a genuine relationship and offer them the opportunity to withdraw at any time. So even if your whole campaign is framed around this one story, if they suddenly have a change of heart, you need to be prepared and have a backup plan, because you cannot be pressuring them into, even if you don't mean to be, don't make them feel that it's all kind of reliant on that. Make sure that consent is genuine and active throughout.
That is some, really great advice, especially about having the backup plan and letting them back out if they want to. And also, I love the idea about the working group. We just from our experience, we went to the London Poverty Summit, the Child Poverty Summit yesterday, and the Octavia Foundation, they had brought together kids to sort of create short films about their experiences, and the kids wrote and sort of helped out in making the films, even acted in it. So just getting them involved doesn't, as Lindsay said, doesn't necessarily have to be in front of the camera, but getting them involved is, getting your service users involved is always a great idea. Is it worth asking donors to hold off until the week of the challenge, or is it off-putting or successful?
I think don't send out a blanket email to everyone saying don't donate in November. But if you've got, some particular high-level donors that you've got a kind of one-to-one relationship with, I would definitely direct them to pause and put it in during the week, and they will all, in my experience, they all get it, and they're like, yeah, why wouldn't I? If it's a matter of weeks and then it's doubled, that is win-win. In terms of kind of wider public, yeah, I wouldn't do a big like don't donate message, but you might choose to, as I said, subtly shift your messaging towards the big give with the save the day or the launch, and maybe build in the advance, you're building up stories and momentum to drive people. So yeah, make sure it's on your website in advance and stuff so people know what's going on. But I don't think, and we talked about on Monday as well, you know, if there's someone that just can't donate online during the week, or they have to donate at another point for some reason, Big Give is an amazing opportunity, but it's not your only opportunity. So your relationships are much more important around the rest of the year, and people will respect that.
Absolutely. I was going to actually just add on a point to that. Oh yes, about just you're saying about that one-to-one relationship, and it's also important to remember your pledges. So our advice is that keep pledges updated about your campaigns. It doesn't have to be like every week, but maybe an email this month and an email in November, and obviously one when the campaign launches. Just keeping them updated about the campaign, make them sort of any like inside information that you can share with them about your campaign, if you're going to be releasing a video soon, stuff like that. And also just keeps them at the front of their mind that they have pledged to your campaign. So when you have to collect pledges after the campaign ends, that's not a shock to them or they've forgotten. So remember that as well.
And they could be amazing ambassadors for you as well, because you know, they might, there's something really appealing to be like, I got here first, almost like I'm a founding part of this campaign.
Yeah.
They can't donate during the week as well, but their kind of friends and etc. can as well, so they can spread the word.
Yeah. Natalie just asked about pledges paying their pledge. How do they pledges pay the pledge? Pledges are paid to you after the campaign ends, and they're paid directly to you in any way that is convenient for the pledger. So it can be check, for example, backs, CAF. It doesn't go through the Big Give website. We'll just ask you to upload a proof of transfer of those funds. We'll send in, when the campaign closes, we'll send in email about collecting your pledges and uploading that proof of transfer of funds. You just need to remember it has to be paid after the campaign ends, and it's paid directly to you, not via Big Give. Josie's just asked, can I chat with someone about topping up pledges after this? Yes, please send an email to us, hello@thebiggive.org.uk. We sent an email a couple of weeks ago about topping up pledges, but yeah, send an email to us and we'll get back to you. Can we edit the copy on the campaign and landing pages? Again, send us an email to hello@thebiggive.org.uk and we can assist you with that. Megan is asking, can the Big Give donations, when the Big Give donations will be received as a payout? We'll send you the payout timelines in a couple of weeks, but from what I remember, as we described, it's going to be 14 days after the donation happens. It's a bit complex, but roughly 14 days after the donation happens, you'll receive a payout for those donations, but we'll send you the proper information in an email in a couple of weeks. So please keep an eye out for that email. Just seeing. So, oh yes, this is a question about messaging. So you touched upon this before about having different comms lined up. So obviously, if charities are doing well, they hit the target, obviously that's probably a bit easier message to get out during the campaign. We've done really well, but you can still donate to us. Do you have any tips on, say, if charities may be slightly off target, about how they can adjust things?
Oh, yeah. Well, we saw that one of the case studies on Monday, they saw the biggest donations, and this resonates with my experience as well, on the first and penultimate day of the challenge. So you will experience a lull in the middle. So don't worry if you're not, flying all the way through. Drive that penultimate day messaging, or the final days, you might see a flurry of donations. If you don't hit your target, the key audience for this is your pledges. You need to have a conversation with them about what that means for their donation and whether they'd still like to donate and how, if that affects them. And then to the general kind of public, anyone who's donated, I would focus on that thank you message. People do care about, you know, you being part of a campaign. But in my experience, people don't really care about the overall target. They're not any more impressed by you raising £10,000 than £9,000. They care what their donation is going to do. So focus on that in the messaging and the impact. Budgets and stuff, that's your internal business. The donors, you know, some donors care, but as a general rule, they want to know more about the stories and what you have raised is going to help you achieve.
Absolutely. Just to clarify a point there is like whatever you do, if you don't hit your target, whatever you do raise, it will still be matched. If you don't use up all your pledge funds during the campaign, then there's the amount that pledges owe you will be prorated, and they can still choose to pay the full pledge to you if they wish to. That's their prerogative. But you just need to communicate the actual amount that they are liable to pay you. I think that is all the questions, and I think we've looked to finish bang on time, which I think will make everyone very happy as well. But yeah, thank you again, Lindsay, for
thank you, and thanks everyone.
Yeah, 2 great webinars. It's always really helpful for charities to get great feedback from them on these webinars. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you everyone for coming to the webinar today. It's been really appreciating your interactions and your questions, and we hope you have a great weekend, and don't forget to sign up for the other webinars. Thank you everyone.
Cheers, take care everyone.
Bye.